When a group of arrogant thugs decided to harass a museum guard for social media fame, they had no idea they were messing with an elite ex-Special Forces operative. Their simple act of bullying was about to uncover an international art heist that would leave the world stunned. What happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about the people we pass by every day. Marcus Chen stood motionless at his post in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Arts, his crisp black uniform making him look more like a decorative statue than a breathing human being. The morning sun streaming through the massive glass dome above cast an almost ethereal glow on the priceless artifacts surrounding him, their glass cases gleaming under the natural light. To the casual observer, he was just another security guard, barely worth a second glance as they hurried past to see the museum's famous exhibits. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tourists flowed around him like water around a rock, some pausing to snap selfies with the stoic guard in the background, others pointing and whispering about his perfectly maintained posture. A group of art students sketched nearby, their pencils scratching against paper as they captured the classical sculptures on display. The air carried the subtle scent of polish and preservation chemicals, mixing with the whispered conversations echoing through the high-ceilinged gallery. A young couple pressed their faces close to a glass case, housing an ancient Egyptian necklace, their breath fogging the protective barrier as they admired the intricate golden work within. But Marcus wasn't just watching the art. He was watching the watchers. His eyes, hidden behind reflective sunglasses, tracked every movement in his section of the gallery with military precision. 8 years in special operations and 3 years in high-stakes art security had taught him to spot the subtle signs others missed. The way certain visitors lingered too long at specific exhibits, how some seemed more interested in the security cameras than the art, the slight bulge of a concealed phone or device where there shouldn't be one, the nervous tapping of fingers against thighs, a telltale sign of anticipation or anxiety. His position might have seemed random to visitors, but it was carefully chosen. From here, he could monitor 3 major galleries, 2 emergency exits, and the service corridor leading to the museum's restoration wing. More importantly, he had clear sightlines to the newly installed Renaissance exhibition, featuring priceless works on loan from European collections. The exhibition had drawn record crowds since its opening last week, but it had also attracted another kind of attention, the kind that made Marcus's instincts tingle with warning. Today, something felt off. A group of 5 young men had entered the gallery 20 minutes ago, but they weren't behaving like typical visitors. They moved together in a tight cluster, their designer clothes and flashy jewelry at odds with their complete disinterest in the priceless artifacts surrounding them. Their leader, a tall man with a sleeve of tattoos partially visible beneath his expensive jacket, kept glancing at his phone while whispering to his companions. The others maintained too much spatial awareness for casual tourists, constantly checking corners and exits. Marcus recognized the signs. They weren't here for the art. "Look at this guy," the tattooed leader said, his voice carrying deliberately across the quiet gallery. He gestured toward Marcus with an expensive phone in his hand, already recording. "Standing there like some kind of robot. Bet he thinks he's really something special in that uniform." The other visitors began to notice, some moving away nervously while others pulled out their phones, anticipating drama. The art students packed up their sketches quickly, sensing trouble. A mother hurried her curious children toward another gallery, throwing concerned glances over her shoulder. "Hey, Ten Hut," one of the gang members called out, laughing. "At ease, soldier." Or maybe he's just a mannequin they forgot to put away. Marcus remained perfectly still, but his mind was racing. These weren't ordinary troublemakers. Their movements were too coordinated, their timing too precise. Behind his sunglasses, his eyes caught a subtle hand signal between 2 of the men. Military hand signals. His trained mind categorized and analyzed every detail. The way they positioned themselves, the rehearsed nature of their taunts, the calculated escalation of their behavior. The tattooed leader, Marcus mentally dubbed him Sleeve, stepped closer, his designer shoes clicking against the polished floor. A heavy silver watch gleamed on his wrist, probably worth more than a year of a regular security guard's salary. "What's wrong, Rent-A-Cop? Too good to talk to us? Or maybe you're just scared?" Marcus said nothing, but he noted how the other four had spread out, creating a loose perimeter. Another red flag. These weren't random thugs looking for social media fame. This was a professionally choreographed distraction. But a distraction from what? His mind raced through the possibilities, each more concerning than the last. In his earpiece, Marcus heard the slight crackle of an incoming transmission, but before the message could come through, Sleeve made his move. He stepped right up to Marcus, close enough that the guard could smell expensive cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. The gallery had grown quieter, the regular visitors sensing the mounting tension. "Maybe you need some motivation to move," Sleeve sneered, raising his hand as if to shove Marcus's shoulder. The morning light caught something metallic partially concealed beneath his sleeve. Not jewelry, but something else. The gallery fell silent, phones raised, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. But Marcus wasn't focused on Sleeve anymore. In his peripheral vision, he'd caught sight of something that made his combat-trained instincts scream in warning. Through the gallery's floor-to-ceiling windows, he spotted a black van pulling up to the service entrance, and two men in maintenance uniforms moving with suspicious purpose. Their uniforms were pristine, too new, and they carried tool bags that seemed unusually heavy for routine maintenance work. The real threat wasn't in front of him. It was already inside the building. Sleeve's hand hovered inches from Marcus's shoulder, the gallery air thick with tension. The gang member's smirk faltered slightly when his attempted intimidation failed to provoke any reaction. Behind him, his followers shifted their weight, uncertain how to proceed when their target wouldn't play along with their script. "Maybe he's deaf," one of them called out, his expensive sneakers squeaking against the polished floor as he moved closer. "Hey buddy, can you hear us?" He snapped his fingers near Marcus's face, drawing nervous laughter from the growing crowd of onlookers. Marcus remained still, but his training had already identified multiple threats beyond the obvious harassment. The way the shortest gang member kept checking his watch every 30 seconds. How another constantly glanced toward the Renaissance exhibition's security panel. The subtle earpieces they thought were hidden by their carefully styled hair. Even their positions in the gallery weren't random. They had strategically placed themselves to block key sightlines from other security cameras. Through the window, Marcus watched the suspicious maintenance men disappear into the service entrance. Their gait and posture screamed military training. The same way they instantly adapted to the building's blind spots told him everything he needed to know. His earpiece crackled again, but this time he caught fragments of urgent conversation. "Breach in Sector 7. Maintenance request? No scheduled." Sleeve grew more agitated by Marcus's continued stillness. "You think you're tough, huh?" He pulled out his phone, making sure the camera was recording. "Let's see how tough you are when this goes viral. Robot guard gets owned. That'll get some views." The other gang members had their phones out too, filming from different angles. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, their own devices raised to capture whatever was about to unfold. Some murmured disapprovingly, but nobody intervened. In the background, Marcus noticed an elderly man with a silver-tipped cane watching intently, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the scene. "Last chance, Rent-A-Cop," Sleeve taunted, his finger hovering over his phone's live stream button. "Say something or things are gonna get interesting." Marcus's peripheral vision caught movement in the service corridor, a flash of maintenance uniforms moving with purpose toward the Renaissance exhibition's restricted area. His trained mind connected the dots, the coordinated distraction, the suspicious maintenance crew, the targeted positioning. This wasn't about social media fame. It was about creating chaos. Sleeve's patience ran out. "All right, have it your way." He reached for Marcus's hat, his fingers almost grazing the brim. "Let's see how you like being—" The elderly man's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, son." The crowd parted as the old man stepped forward, his cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. Despite his age, he moved with a fluid grace that caught Marcus's attention. Military bearing never really goes away. "Mind your own business, Grandpa," Sleeve snapped, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The old man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know what I see? He gestured with his cane toward the gang. I see 5 young men who clearly spent a lot of money to look tough, about to make a very costly mistake. One of the gang members stepped toward the old man, but Sleeve held up his hand, stopping him. Something in the elderly man's calm demeanor had triggered his survival instincts. You should listen to your friend. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice steady and controlled. The sudden break in his silence caught everyone off guard. Walk away now. Sleeve's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. The live stream comments were flooding in, urging him to act. His reputation was on the line. Or what? You'll call backup? He laughed, but it sounded forced. Look around, tough guy. It's 5 of us and one of... A crash echoed from the direction of the Renaissance exhibition, followed by the muffled sound of breaking glass. The gang members exchanged quick glances, their facade of random troublemakers cracking for just a moment. Marcus saw what no one else did, the subtle hand signal Sleeve gave his crew, the way they immediately began to spread out further, creating a wider distraction zone. These weren't random thugs. They were trained operatives playing a part, and their real mission was about to begin. The elderly man caught Marcus's eye and tapped his cane twice on the floor, an old military signal for imminent threat. Marcus gave an imperceptible nod. Sometimes the best allies come from unexpected places. Time's up, Sleeve announced loudly, playing to his live audience. Let's show this toy soldier what happens when... Another crash, louder this time. Security alarms began to wail throughout the gallery. The crowd of onlookers startled, some backing away, others pressing forward to get better footage. In the confusion, Marcus saw 2 of the gang members slip away toward the service corridor. The real operation was starting, and this confrontation was just the beginning. Whatever was about to happen would make a social media prank look like child's play. Marcus knew he had to make a choice, maintain his cover or stop what was coming. Through his earpiece, he heard the words he'd been dreading. Security breach in the Renaissance wing. Armed suspects spotted. All units respond. The game was about to change, and everyone in that gallery was about to learn that appearances can be dangerously deceiving. The old man with the cane moved with surprising agility, positioning himself strategically between Marcus and the remaining gang members. His silver-tipped cane tapped against the floor in what seemed like random patterns, but Marcus recognized the old military code. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Ready to engage. You know what I find interesting? The elderly man said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from decades of command. In my experience, people who make the most noise usually have something to hide. He fixed Sleeve with a penetrating stare. What are you hiding, son? Sleeve's cocky demeanor faltered for a split second. Back off, old man. This isn't your fight. The name's Commander James Sullivan, retired. The old man's stern expression softened into an almost predatory smile. Though some people used to call me Ghost back in my Special Forces days. Marcus kept his position, but his mind raced through military databases he'd memorized during his service. Commander Sullivan, the legendary Ghost, had led some of the most successful covert operations in modern history. His presence here couldn't be a coincidence. The security alarms continued to wail, and through his earpiece, Marcus heard increasingly frantic radio chatter. Multiple breaches reported, artifacts compromised, armed suspects in Sector 5. Sullivan's cane tapped again. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. Watch the exits. Sleeve's phone was still recording, but his attention had shifted. He kept glancing toward the Renaissance exhibition, where the sounds of chaos were growing louder. The crowd of onlookers had thinned, some fleeing when the alarms started, others hanging back at a safer distance, still recording with their phones. Your friends seem to be in an awful hurry, Sullivan observed, nodding toward the 2 gang members who had slipped away. Late for an appointment, perhaps? None of your business, Sleeve snapped, but his cool facade was crumbling. His remaining companions shifted nervously, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Marcus caught Sullivan's subtle nod. The old commander had spotted it too. These weren't ordinary street thugs. Their movements, their positioning, even the way they checked their corners screamed military training. But something wasn't adding up. Why would trained operatives draw so much attention to themselves? Through the gallery windows, Marcus spotted more movement. The black van had repositioned, its back doors now facing the service entrance. A third man in maintenance coveralls was loading what looked like heavy equipment into the vehicle. Sullivan's cane tapped again. Danger, immediate response needed. "You know what else I find interesting?" Sullivan continued, taking a step closer to Sleeve. "Those tattoos on your arm. That's a very specific pattern. 4th Battalion, wasn't it? Before you went private sector?" Sleeve's expression darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Sullivan's voice hardened. "I trained half the operators in that unit, including the ones who washed out and went mercenary." The gallery air crackled with tension. Sleeve's live stream followers were flooding the comments with confusion, unable to understand the sudden shift in the confrontation's tone. Marcus heard heavy footsteps approaching from the service corridor. Through his earpiece, "Suspects armed and dangerous. Shots fired in lower level. All units respond." Sullivan's cane tapped one final message. "Ready." "Last chance," Marcus spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Whatever you're really here for, it's not worth it." Sleeve's face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what this is worth." His hand moved toward his jacket, where the metallic object Marcus had noticed earlier was concealed. But Sullivan was faster. In one fluid motion, the elderly commander swung his cane up, catching Sleeve's arm before he could reach his weapon. The silver tip pressed against a nerve point, causing Sleeve to gasp in pain. "Age and treachery," Sullivan said calmly. "Beat youth and skill every time." The remaining gang members moved to intervene, but Marcus was already in motion. His statue-like stillness transformed into explosive action. In 2 precise movements, he disarmed one attacker and used the man's momentum to send him sprawling into his companion. The crowd gasped, phones raised high to capture the sudden burst of action. But Marcus wasn't playing for the cameras anymore. Through his earpiece, he heard the words that changed everything. Multiple artifacts missing. Suspects heading for north exit, armed and extremely dangerous. Sullivan's cane swept Sleeve's legs out from under him, sending the gang leader crashing to the floor. His phone skittered across the polished marble, the live stream still running. "I didn't read your file wrong, did I?" Sullivan asked, looking down at Sleeve. "You're just the distraction. The real show is happening somewhere else." Sleeve spat a curse, but his eyes betrayed his fear. The plan was unraveling, and everyone knew it. Marcus pressed his radio button. "Control, this is Chen. We have a situation at the North Gallery. Request immediate backup. Be advised, suspects are ex-military, likely armed." Sullivan's cane tapped one more message. Time to hunt. The real operation was about to begin, and Marcus had just found the most unlikely but invaluable ally he could have hoped for. Together, they might be the only thing standing between priceless artifacts and a crew of highly trained thieves. And somewhere in the building, the clock was ticking. The security alarms continued blaring throughout the museum as Marcus and Commander Sullivan worked quickly to secure the 3 subdued gang members. Museum security finally arrived, their radios crackling with panicked chatter about the situation unfolding in the Renaissance wing. The remaining tourists huddled in small groups near the exits, phones still raised to capture every moment of the unfolding drama. "Keep these 3 separate," Marcus instructed the security team, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to giving orders in crisis situations. "They're trained operatives, not common criminals. Don't let them communicate with each other and watch their hands at all times. These men are experts at passing signals." He turned to his newfound ally, noting how the elderly commander's keen eyes were already scanning the gallery for additional threats. "Commander, I could use your expertise." Sullivan nodded grimly, his silver-tipped cane tapping thoughtfully against the marble floor. "The moment I saw their hand signals, I knew this was bigger than some social media stunt. These boys are ex-4th Battalion, specialized in complex extraction operations. I recognize their methodology. Their positioning wasn't random. They were controlling sightlines, manipulating crowd movement. Like stealing priceless artifacts, Marcus added, his mind racing through possibilities. He glanced at the fallen phone still live-streaming nearby, its comments section flooding with confused viewers trying to understand what they were watching. But why create such an obvious distraction? They drew every eye in the building to this spot. Professional thieves usually want to avoid attention, not attract it. Sullivan's eyes narrowed as he watched the security team leading away the subdued gang members. Unless that was exactly the point, where's everyone looking right now? What are they filming? Who are they calling? Marcus scanned the gallery, taking in every detail with his trained eye. Dozens of phones were still recording, live streaming the aftermath of the confrontation. Security personnel were focused on securing the area and dealing with the detained gang members. Museum staff were trying to guide remaining visitors toward the exits. Even the museum's emergency protocols would have staff responding to the most visible threats first. The chaos was perfect. Too perfect. They're using basic human nature against us, Marcus realized, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Everyone's watching the show, while the real operation. His voice trailed off as a new thought struck him. The pieces started clicking together like tumblers in a lock. The maintenance crew, the service entrance, the timing of it all. Sullivan's cane tapped thoughtfully against the floor, the sound almost lost in the continuing wail of alarms. How well do you know this building's layout? Every corner, every service corridor, every blind spot. Like the back of my hand, Marcus replied, automatically checking his weapon while keeping his voice low to avoid alarming nearby civilians. 3 years on security detail here, but something's not adding up. The Renaissance exhibition has state-of-the-art security, multiple layers of protection, infrared sensors, pressure plates, molecular density scanners. They couldn't just walk in and... He stopped mid-sentence, a cold realization washing over him like ice water. Unless they had inside help. Through his earpiece, a new message crackled with static urgency. Alert all units. Dr. Victoria Hayes, head of restoration, is not responding to radio calls. Last seen entering the secure storage area with 2 maintenance workers. Security cameras in that sector are experiencing unexplained interference. Sullivan caught the change in Marcus's expression, reading the tension in his jaw. What is it? What are you hearing? The head of restoration, Marcus said quietly, his mind already calculating possibilities and escape routes. She has access to everything. Security codes, vault combinations, restoration schedules, environmental controls. If they compromised her somehow, threatened her family maybe, or if she's working with them, Sullivan added darkly, his expression hardening with decades of experience reading similar situations. How long has she been here? When was she vetted? 6 months. Marcus checked his watch, the pieces falling into place faster now. And she specifically requested access to the secure storage area for today, said she needed to examine some new acquisitions before they went on display. The paperwork all checked out, but now... Sullivan's military-trained mind connected the dots with practiced efficiency. The social media drama, the fake maintenance crew, the security breach, it's all theater. They needed chaos, needed everyone looking in the wrong direction. Classic military deception tactics. Create a spectacle here, while the real operation happens there, Marcus finished. His radio crackled again with increasingly urgent news. Multiple artifacts reported missing from secure storage, high-value pieces from the Renaissance collection. Dr. Hayes' security credentials were used to access the vault 8 minutes ago. Environmental controls showing unauthorized access attempts. 8 minutes, Marcus muttered, his jaw tightening. That's right when Sleeve and his crew started their performance. Perfect timing. Sullivan tapped his cane thoughtfully, his eyes distant as if recalling similar operations from his past. A classic misdirection play, but they made one crucial mistake. A mistake I've seen take down better operators than these. What's that? They got greedy. Sullivan's eyes gleamed with the experience of countless operations. A simple grab and go would have worked. Quick, clean, minimal exposure. But they tried to create too perfect a distraction. Drew too much attention. Made it too theatrical. started believing their own cover story. Marcus nodded, understanding dawning as he recalled his own military training. Because they're not just thieves. They're showing off, proving something. Maybe to their employer, maybe to themselves. Exactly. Sullivan gestured toward the service entrance with his cane. And people who show off tend to leave traces. They get sloppy, make mistakes. Our job is to find those mistakes and exploit them. Marcus keyed his radio, his voice steady and commanding. Control, this is Chen. Lock down all exits immediately. Full containment protocol. And get me the surveillance feeds from the loading dock for the past hour. Every frame, every angle. Already on it, came the response, followed by static and a moment of hesitation. But sir, there's something else. The vault's environmental control system has been tampered with. Temperatures rising rapidly. We're seeing critical warnings across the system. Sullivan's expression darkened. The Renaissance pieces, they're sensitive to temperature changes, aren't they? Particularly the older canvas works and delicate pigments. Extremely, Marcus confirmed, his mind already calculating the damage potential. Even a few degrees can cause irreversible damage. Warping, cracking, color degradation. He paused, realization hitting him. They're forcing our hand. We either let them escape with what they've already taken, or risk destroying everything else in the vault trying to stop them. The commander's cane tapped a rapid sequence, an old military code for immediate action required. So what's the play, son? Time's not on our side. Marcus straightened his uniform, his mind already formulating a plan. They think they're the only ones who can cause a distraction. Time to show them how wrong they are. And I think I know exactly where to hit them. Through the gallery windows, they could see the black van still idling by the service entrance, its engine running. Two more figures in maintenance uniforms emerged from a side door, carrying what looked like equipment cases, but Marcus noticed they handled them with too much care for simple tools. They're moving, Sullivan observed, his posture shifting subtly into combat readiness despite his age. What's our next move? Marcus's eyes hardened with determination, the last pieces of his plan falling into place. We're going hunting, Commander, and this time, we're writing the script. The real game was just beginning, and the pieces were finally falling into place. What had started as a simple act of bullying had cracked open to reveal something far more sinister, a carefully orchestrated heist months in the planning. But now, the hunters were about to become the hunted, and Marcus intended to show them exactly why underestimating a simple museum guard had been their biggest mistake. Marcus moved with fluid precision toward the service corridor, Sullivan keeping pace beside him despite his age. The alarms had shifted to a lower, more urgent tone, the kind reserved for critical environmental system failures. Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear the growing panic in the control room as they monitored the vault's rising temperature. Thermal sensors showing critical levels in sectors 3 through 7, the radio crackled. Preservation protocols failing. Estimated 15 minutes until irreversible damage to sensitive artifacts. They're not just stealing art, Sullivan muttered, his cane now revealing its true nature as he twisted the handle, exposing a concealed blade. They're trying to destroy what they can't take. Marcus nodded grimly. Maximum chaos. If the environmental controls fail completely, the museum will be focused on saving their collection rather than catching the thieves. He paused at a security junction, quickly entering an override code. But they didn't count on one thing. What's that? I helped design these security systems. Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing the building's layout. Every failsafe, every backup protocol, I know them all, including the ones that aren't in the official documentation. Red warning indicators flashed across the display, showing multiple breach points and system failures. But Marcus's trained eye caught something else, a pattern in the chaos. He zoomed in on the service area near the loading dock. Look here, he pointed. The temperature's rising in sectors 3 through 7, but sector 8, the one closest to their escape route, is completely stable. They're creating a safe corridor for transport. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. Smart. The valuable pieces would be vulnerable to temperature damage during transit. They need to maintain optimal conditions until they're safely away. A crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the building, followed by shouting. Marcus's radio came to life again. Multiple suspects spotted in the east wing, armed and... The transmission cut off with a burst of static. They're jamming communications now, Sullivan observed, getting ready for their final push. Marcus touched his earpiece. Control, switch to backup frequency Delta. Initiate Protocol 7. The response came through clearly on the new channel. Protocol 7 initiated. Be advised, SWAT team is 10 minutes out. We don't have 10 minutes, Marcus said, checking his watch. The temperature damage will be catastrophic by then. He turned to Sullivan. Commander, I need a favor. Sullivan smiled grimly. Let me guess, you need someone to cause a little trouble? More than a little. I need you to give them a new problem to worry about. Something big enough to make them think their plan is falling apart, Sullivan finished, already understanding. I can do that. But what will you be doing? Marcus pulled up another section of the holographic display. There's a maintenance tunnel under the loading dock. It connects to the old steam system. If I can get there without being seen... You can cut off their escape route, Sullivan nodded approvingly. But you'll be outnumbered, son. These aren't museum tourists you'll be dealing with. I'm counting on it. Marcus checked his weapon, then retrieved a small device from a hidden compartment in his uniform. They think they've got everything planned perfectly. Time to show them what happens when plans go wrong. Sullivan's cane tapped a quick sequence. Good hunting. Try not to die. I'm too old to break in a new partner. They split up, Sullivan heading toward the east wing while Marcus made his way to a seemingly ordinary utility door. As he entered his access code, he heard Sullivan's voice echoing through the gallery. Security breach. Armed suspects in the main hall. All units respond. The old commander knew how to cause chaos when needed. Already Marcus could hear running footsteps as security teams responded to the false alarm. More importantly, he heard the rushed radio chatter of the real thieves, their disciplined calm starting to crack. What's going on up there? One voice demanded. Doesn't matter, another replied. Stick to the plan. 4 minutes until final extraction. Marcus smiled grimly as he descended into the maintenance tunnel. They thought they were still in control, still running their carefully orchestrated operation. They had no idea what was coming. The tunnel was narrow and dark, filled with pipes and old electrical conduits. Marcus moved silently, his footsteps masked by the distant alarms and the hum of ancient machinery. Above him, he could feel the vibrations of heavy equipment being moved, the stolen artifacts being prepared for transport. His earpiece crackled with Sullivan's voice. Multiple contacts taking the bait. They're redirecting security teams away from the loading dock. You've got maybe 3 minutes before they realize what's happening. Marcus reached the access point beneath the loading dock just as his radio came alive with urgent chatter. Temperature critical in Sector 5. Preservation protocols failing. All available restoration teams respond immediately. Through the grating above him, Marcus could see boots moving quickly, hear the sound of cases being loaded. One voice rose above the others. Forget the rest. Get these pieces secured. Transport leaves in 2 minutes. Marcus checked his watch, mentally counting down. Everything he'd seen told him these were professionals, ex-military operators with extensive training. They'd plan for every contingency, prepare for every possible interference, but they hadn't planned for him. He pulled out the device he'd retrieved earlier, a prototype sonic disruptor designed to interfere with electronic systems, the kind of tool that officially didn't exist, much like his own real background in museum security. Time to rewrite the script, he muttered, and pressed the activation switch. Above him, chaos erupted as every electronic system in the loading dock suddenly went haywire. Security doors slammed shut, lights flickered, and the carefully maintained temperature controls they'd been using spiraled into chaos. The hunt was on, and Marcus was done playing defense. The loading dock erupted into controlled chaos as Marcus's sonic disruptor wreaked havoc on the thieves' carefully planned operation. Through the grating above, he could hear their disciplined calm cracking under the pressure of cascading system failures. What the hell's happening? A voice demanded. The environmental controls are going crazy. Fix it, another ordered. a woman's voice that Marcus recognized as Dr. Hayes, the head of restoration. Those pieces can't survive these temperature fluctuations. Marcus watched through the grating as boots scrambled across the concrete floor. Cases were being hastily opened, presumably to check on the stolen artifacts. The thieves' military training was evident in how they maintained formation, even while dealing with the unexpected crisis. "The backup systems aren't responding," someone reported. "Everything's locked down." Marcus silently shifted position, moving toward the maintenance tunnel's emergency access ladder. His earpiece crackled with Sullivan's voice. "SWAT team's been delayed. Traffic accident blocking their route. Convenient timing." "They planned for outside interference," Marcus whispered back. "Probably had a team ready to create a distraction if needed." He paused, listening to the increasingly frantic activity above. "How's our friend Sleeve doing?" "Still secured, but he's smirking like he knows something we don't. These people have contingencies for their contingencies." Above, Dr. Hayes was issuing rapid orders. "Get the primary pieces to the van. We'll have to abandon the secondary targets, and someone find out what's interfering with our systems." Marcus checked his watch. The sonic disruptor would only work for another minute before burning out. He needed to time this perfectly. "Commander," he whispered into his radio, "I need another distraction. Something to divide their attention." "Already on it, son. Watch for my signal." Through the grating, Marcus could see 8 pairs of boots, more than they'd initially estimated. All moved with military precision, suggesting this crew was larger and better trained than expected. He spotted Dr. Hayes's distinctive red-soled designer shoes, moving purposefully between the stolen artifacts. Suddenly, Sullivan's voice boomed through the building's PA system. "Attention, all units." Armed suspects spotted in the Egyptian wing. Shots fired. All security teams respond immediately. The effect was instant. Marcus could see the thieves hesitating, their disciplined formation wavering as they tried to decide how to respond to this new threat. "Ignore it," Dr. Hayes commanded. "It's a diversion. Focus on the extraction." But her voice carried an edge of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Their perfect plan was unraveling, and she knew it. Marcus keyed his radio. "Control, initiate lockdown sequence Delta 7. Authorization code Sierra Echo Charlie." The response was immediate. Heavy security shutters began descending over the loading dock's exits, designed to be impenetrable even to explosive charges. The thieves' escape route was disappearing before their eyes. "Someone's playing us," one of the thieves growled. "This isn't random interference." Dr. Hayes's voice turned sharp. "Check the maintenance tunnels." "Now." Marcus smiled grimly. They were smart, but they'd realized it too late. The sonic disruptor's effect faded, and in the sudden electronic silence, he made his move. With practiced efficiency, he removed the grating and rolled a series of small devices across the loading dock floor. They looked like marbles but contained a special compound developed for crowd control, a non-lethal combination of smoke and disorienting lights. "Gas!" one of the thieves shouted, but the warning came too late. The devices activated simultaneously, filling the loading dock with swirling, disorienting patterns of smoke and light. Marcus pulled on his tactical goggles, the specialized lenses allowing him to see clearly through the chaos. He emerged from the maintenance tunnel like a ghost, moving through the smoke with practiced precision. The thieves were well trained, immediately forming a defensive formation, but their military tactics worked against them in the confined space. Marcus moved among them like water, his close-quarters combat training evident in every strike. 2 went down before they could even identify where the attack was coming from. A third managed to throw a punch, but Marcus redirected the force, sending the man crashing into a stack of empty crates. "Behind you!" Dr. Hayes screamed, but her warning came too late for the 4th thief, who crumpled under a precisely delivered strike to a nerve cluster. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Sullivan coordinating with security teams, making sure no one interfered with what was happening in the loading dock. The old commander understood. This needed to end here decisively. The remaining thieves were adapting to the smoke and lights, their training allowing them to compensate for the disorientation. They moved to surround Marcus, their movements suggesting they'd worked together in combat situations before. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Dr. Hayes called out from somewhere in the smoke. "This is bigger than you realize." Marcus caught movement to his left, a shadow in the swirling smoke moving with deadly purpose. He sidestepped just as a knife blade sliced through the space where his throat had been. "Maybe," he replied calmly, deflecting another attack and responding with a precise counterstrike. "But right now, all I see is a group of thieves who made the mistake of thinking a museum would be an easy target." The fight was far from over, but Marcus had achieved his primary goal. The thieves' perfect plan had shattered, and now they were operating in his environment, playing by his rules, and he was just getting started. The smoke began to thin in the loading dock, revealing the aftermath of Marcus's initial assault. 4 of the thieves lay incapacitated, while 3 others maintained a defensive formation around Dr. Hayes. The stolen artifacts sat in reinforced cases nearby, their sophisticated environmental controls blinking with warning lights. "You're good, Doctor," Hayes said, her cultured accent carrying a note of genuine admiration. "Military background, obviously. Special operations, probably with additional specialized training in protection services. But you're not just museum security, are you?" Marcus moved in a careful circle, keeping all opponents in view. "Funny, I was about to say something similar about you, Doctor. Your restoration credentials are impeccable, almost too perfect, like they were crafted by someone who knows exactly what credentials should look like." He caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Through his earpiece, Sullivan's voice came through. "Records check complete. The real Victoria Hayes died 6 months ago in a car accident in Switzerland. Someone's been using her identity since then." "You've done your homework," the fake Dr. Hayes replied, subtly signaling to her remaining men. "But you're still missing the bigger picture. This isn't about stealing art." One of the thieves moved slightly, trying to flank Marcus, but froze when Marcus's hand moved to his concealed weapon. "The temperature controls," Marcus said. "You're not just trying to steal specific pieces. You're trying to destroy particular ones. The question is, why?" A slow smile spread across Hayes's face. "Insurance companies call it selective preservation. Sometimes certain artifacts need to disappear permanently. Questions of ownership, legitimacy, providence, they can all be solved with the right application of environmental damage." Marcus's mind raced through the implications. The Renaissance exhibition. Some of those pieces have disputed ownership claims, if they're damaged beyond repair. The insurance pays out, the disputes end, and certain interested parties get to write off their losses while keeping the settlement money, Hayes finished. "A very profitable arrangement for everyone involved." "Except for the art that gets destroyed," Marcus countered. "Centuries of history and culture, erased for insurance fraud." Hayes shrugged elegantly. "Culture evolves. Sometimes the past needs to be edited." Through his earpiece, Sullivan's voice carried urgent news. "Marcus, we've got a problem. Just intercepted a transmission. They've got another team en route. Heavy backup, probably ex-military contractors, 5 minutes out tops." Marcus kept his expression neutral, but his mind was already calculating options. The loading dock's security shutters would hold against conventional weapons, but professional contractors would come prepared for serious breaching. "You're stalling," Marcus said, watching Hayes's body language carefully, waiting for something, or someone. Hayes checked her expensive watch. "Clever boy. You see, what's happening here? It's just one small part of a much larger operation. Right now, similar accidents are occurring at 3 other major museums across the country. The art world is about to have a very bad day." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. This wasn't just about insurance fraud. It was about systematically destroying specific pieces of art, presumably ones that could prove or disprove the legitimacy of other works. By destroying key pieces, they could potentially manipulate the entire market. "Who's really behind this?" Marcus demanded. "Who has the resources to coordinate something this big?" Hayes's smile turned predatory. "You really think I'd—" The explosion cut her off, rocking the entire loading dock. The security shutters held, but the blast had come from inside the building. Through the smoke, Marcus heard Sullivan's urgent voice. "Multiple breaches! They're not just coming from outside, they're already in the building." Marcus had a split second to react as Hayes's remaining men launched their attack. He deflected the first strike, using the attacker's momentum to send him crashing into a support pillar, but the second man managed to land a solid hit to his ribs. "You pushed too hard," Hayes called out as she moved toward the stolen artifacts. "Made us change the timeline. Now you get to watch everything burn." Another explosion rocked the building closer this time. Warning lights flashed as the museum's main power grid failed, switching to emergency systems. Through the chaos, Marcus heard Sullivan coordinating with the remaining security teams, trying to contain multiple threats simultaneously. "Last chance," Marcus said, recovering his stance despite the pain in his ribs. "This ends now, or what?" Hayes laughed. "Look around you. Your backup is busy dealing with our distractions. SWAT can't get through our roadblocks, and in about 2 minutes, this entire wing of the museum is going to experience a catastrophic environmental system failure. Decades of priceless art, lost forever. And you get to be the guard who failed to stop it." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "You really should have checked my background more carefully." Hayes's confidence wavered slightly. "What? You assumed I was military because of my training? But before that? I was something else entirely." Marcus reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device. "I was an art preservation specialist, with a very particular set of skills." Hayes's eyes widened as she recognized the device, a master control key for the museum's environmental systems, one that shouldn't exist. "Impossible," she whispered. "The systems are locked down, the controls are running on my custom protocols," Marcus finished. "The ones I designed and installed 3 years ago, the ones not in any official documentation." The tide was about to turn, but the real war for the museum's treasures was just beginning. Hayes's expression shifted from confidence to calculated fury as Marcus held up the master control key. Behind her, the remaining thieves adjusted their positions, their military training evident in how they maintained coverage of all angles despite their reduced numbers. 3 years, Hayes said slowly, her mind visibly reassessing everything she thought she knew about her opponent. "You've been preparing for something like this for 3 years?" Marcus's finger hovered over the control key. "Not specifically this, but I learned a long time ago that the best way to protect art is to think like the people who want to steal it, or destroy it." Through his earpiece, Sullivan's voice came through with urgency. "Multiple breach points confirmed. Professional team, heavily armed. They're moving methodically through the building, clearing security as they go. These aren't just mercenaries, they're elite contractors." Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The loading dock's reinforced walls trembled, dust raining down from the ceiling. Hayes glanced upward, then back at Marcus with a knowing smile. "Your backup plan won't save you," she said. "Those environmental controls you're so proud of? They're not the only systems we've compromised." She pulled out her phone, showing a screen filled with cascading security protocols. "Right now, my team is accessing the museum's central database. Every record, every certificate of authenticity, every provenance document, all being systematically corrupted." Marcus felt his blood run cold. The physical art was only part of the equation. Without proper documentation, even undamaged pieces could become virtually worthless, their histories lost or questioned. "Think bigger," Hayes continued, clearly enjoying his reaction. "What happens when multiple major museums simultaneously lose their authentication records? When insurance companies can't verify ownership histories? When every private collector suddenly has to question the legitimacy of their holdings? The entire market collapses," Marcus realized, creating chaos that benefits whoever's really behind this. Hayes's smile widened. "Now you're beginning to understand the scale of what's happening. This isn't about stealing a few paintings or destroying some inconvenient artifacts. This is about rewriting art history itself." Through the loading dock's windows, Marcus could see more black vans arriving, disgorging figures in tactical gear. Sullivan's voice crackled through his earpiece. 2 minutes until they breach the outer perimeter. Whatever you're planning, son, better do it fast. Marcus's mind raced through options. The master control key could restore the environmental systems, saving the art from physical damage, but the digital threat was potentially even more devastating. He needed to make a choice: protect the physical artifacts or defend the museum's digital infrastructure. You know what's interesting about art authentication? Marcus said, keeping his voice steady despite the mounting pressure. Everyone focuses on the documents, the certificates, the digital records, but they forget something crucial. Hayes raised an eyebrow. And what's that? The people who know how to read the art itself. Marcus took a calculated step forward. You can destroy every document in the database, corrupt every digital record, but you can't erase the knowledge of how to authenticate pieces through technique analysis, material composition, artistic style. Knowledge that dies with the experts who hold it, Hayes countered. Everything can be corrupted, given enough time and resources. Another explosion, much closer now. The loading dock's security shutters groaned under some massive impact. Hayes's remaining men tensed, ready for their backup to arrive. But Marcus smiled. You still don't get it, do you? Why I've been positioned here for 3 years. What my real job has been. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Hayes's face. Your security, she said, but her voice held a note of question. That's my cover, yes. Marcus held up the master control key. But my real work? I've been documenting everything. Every piece that's passed through this museum, every technique, every material signature, every unique artistic fingerprint, all stored in a secure system completely separate from the museum's network. Hayes's composure cracked slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? Marcus pressed a sequence on the control key. Throughout the loading dock, hidden panels slid open in the walls, revealing sophisticated scanning equipment. 3 years of detailed analysis backed up on quantum-encrypted drives, a complete authentication database that exists completely off-grid. Kill him, Hayes snapped, her carefully maintained control finally breaking. Kill him now. Her men moved with deadly precision, but Marcus was already in motion. He'd anticipated the attack, using the moment of revelation to position himself perfectly. The first attacker found himself flying through the air, his own momentum used against him. The second caught a precisely delivered strike to a nerve cluster that dropped him instantly. Through his earpiece, Sullivan's voice carried grim satisfaction. Cavalry's finally here, son. SWAT just breached the roadblocks. 2 minutes out. Hayes backed toward the stolen artifacts, her eyes darting between Marcus and the security shutters that were now beginning to buckle under repeated impacts. You've changed nothing, she spat. The plan is already in motion. The market will burn, and from the ashes, Marcus cut her off. The truth will survive. Because that's what I've spent 3 years protecting. Not just the art, but the knowledge of how to verify it. The shutters exploded inward as Hayes's backup team finally breached the loading dock. But Marcus was ready. Sometimes the best way to protect art wasn't from the outside. It was from within. And he'd prepared for this moment longer than anyone knew. The loading dock erupted into controlled chaos as the breach team poured through the shattered security shutters. 8 operators in full tactical gear, moving with the kind of precision that only came from years of military experience. Their weapons were modified for non-lethal rounds. They wanted to avoid damaging the artifacts. Secure the packages, the team leader barked, his voice muffled behind a tactical mask. Primary target is the authentication data. Everything else is secondary. Marcus moved with fluid grace, positioning himself between the breach team and the scanning equipment he'd revealed. Through his earpiece, Sullivan's voice came through clearly. SWAT's moving into position. 1 minute. But something's wrong. We're picking up multiple radio frequencies. There's another team we're not seeing. Hayes had retreated to a defensive position behind her reinforced cases, her elegant composure restored now that her backup had arrived. You should have stayed a simple security guard, she called out. Now you get to watch everything you've built crumble. But Marcus wasn't watching her anymore. His trained eye had caught something in the breach team's movements, a subtle hesitation, a fractional delay in their coordination. These weren't just elite contractors. They were holding back. "Commander," Marcus whispered into his radio, "these operators, they're not mercenaries. Check their gear. Everything's top-line military issue, but with serial numbers removed." Sullivan's sharp intake of breath confirmed Marcus's suspicion. "Black Ops. Someone's using official resources off the books. This goes higher than we thought." The breach team spread out in a standard room-clearing formation, but their movements telegraphed their real objective. They weren't just here for the art or the authentication data. They were containing the situation. "Last chance," the team leader called out. "Stand down and walk away. This doesn't have to get messy." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." His hand moved to a concealed panel in his uniform. "But first, let me share something interesting about art preservation." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "You see, when you work with priceless artifacts, you learn that sometimes the best defense isn't high-tech security." Marcus's fingers found the hidden switch. "Sometimes it's something much simpler." The loading dock's sprinkler system activated, but instead of water, a fine mist filled the air. The breach team reacted instantly, raising their weapons, but Marcus was already moving. "That mist?" he called out as he executed a perfect rolling dive behind a storage container. "It's a special compound we use for emergency preservation, completely harmless to humans, but absolutely devastating to any electronic device not specifically shielded against it." The effect was immediate. The breach team's tactical gear, their communication systems, targeting arrays, and night vision equipment began shorting out. Hayes's phone sparked and died in her hand, cutting off her access to the museum's systems. "Kill the mist!" Hayes screamed, but it was too late. The compound had already done its work, reducing the high-tech tactical team to basic weapons and training. Through his earpiece, now protected by the same shielding as his scanning equipment, Sullivan's voice carried a note of admiration. "Clever boy. But they're still armed and dangerous." Marcus was already implementing the next phase of his plan. "Commander, remember that protocol we discussed? The one about rapid artifact relocation?" "Already on it, son. Teams are in position." The breach team leader seemed to realize something was wrong. "Secure those cases now," he ordered. But as his men moved toward the stolen artifacts, a series of mechanical whirs filled the loading dock. Hidden panels in the floor slid open, and the cases containing the priceless artifacts began descending into reinforced storage chambers beneath the loading dock. Hayes lunged forward, trying to grab one, but Marcus intercepted her with practiced efficiency. 3 years, he said, blocking her desperate attack. 3 years of installing backup systems, planning for every contingency. Did you really think I was just standing guard? The breach team opened fire with their non-lethal rounds, but Marcus had already calculated their likely targeting vectors. He moved through their barrage like water, each motion planned and precise. 2 operators went down to perfectly placed counterstrikes before they could adjust their aim. "The artifacts are gone," Marcus announced to the remaining operators. "Secured in preservation chambers that would take hours to breach. By then, every law enforcement agency in the city will be here. Is that really how you want this to go?" The team leader raised his hand, signaling his men to hold position. Through the dissipating preservation mist, his tactical mask couldn't hide the calculation in his eyes. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "This operation has clearance from levels you can't imagine." Marcus's response was cut off by Sullivan's urgent warning. "Third team confirmed. They're accessing the lower levels through the old maintenance tunnels. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast." The game was changing again. Marcus had planned for professional thieves, for corrupt officials, even for military contractors. But a black ops team with government backing? That suggested something far more sinister behind Hayes's art market manipulation scheme. He had seconds to make a decision that would affect not just the museum's collection, but potentially the entire structure of the international art world. The next moves would have to be perfect. The real battle was just beginning. The loading dock had become a standoff zone, with Marcus caught between the remaining breach team operators and Hayes' position. The preservation mist was settling, leaving a fine coating on every unshielded electronic device. Through his earpiece, Sullivan's updates painted an increasingly complex picture. "Third team is moving fast through the maintenance tunnels," the commander reported. "Professional infiltration unit using old blueprints we didn't know existed. They're heading straight for the underground vault complex." Marcus maintained his defensive stance, mind racing through possibilities. Those tunnels were sealed decades ago. The only way they'd know about them is if someone gave them the original construction plans, Hayes interrupted, a triumphant smile playing across her face. "Plans that were supposed to be destroyed after the Cold War. Amazing what you can find in certain classified archives." The breach team leader took a step forward, his disabled tactical gear creating an eerie silhouette in the emergency lighting. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that, but this ends now. Stand down or the next team won't be using non-lethal rounds." Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Interesting choice of words. The next team. Not my team. You're not all working together, are you? A subtle tension rippled through the breach team. Hayes' expression flickered, a micro-expression of surprise that confirmed Marcus's suspicion. "Multiple agencies," Marcus continued, the pieces falling into place, "each with their own agenda. The art theft is just cover for something bigger, isn't it?" "Enough," Hayes snapped, but her composure was cracking. "You're just stalling. The vault team will reach the backup servers any minute now. All your precious authentication data will be corrupted beyond recovery." "About that," Marcus said calmly. "Commander, how's our contingency plan looking?" Sullivan's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Remote backup completed 10 minutes ago. Every piece of authentication data safely transmitted to secure locations. They can destroy the servers if they want. They'll just be destroying empty drives." Hayes' face contorted with rage. "You're lying. That much data couldn't be transmitted without us detecting it." "Unless," Marcus countered, "someone had spent 3 years installing a completely independent communication system throughout the museum, one that doesn't use any standard frequencies or protocols." The breach team leader raised his hand, signaling his men to adjust their positions. "Last warning. The vault team will reach their objective in 2 minutes. When they do..." A massive explosion rocked the building's foundation, cutting him off. But Marcus noticed something crucial. The explosion had come from the wrong direction. "Commander?" he asked quietly. "Right on schedule," Sullivan replied. "Remember those tunnels they're using? Amazing how unstable old construction can be, especially when someone spends 3 years strategically weakening key support sections." Hayes' eyes widened in understanding. "You collapsed the tunnels." "Not all of them," Marcus corrected. "Just enough to force your vault team to take a very specific route, one that leads them exactly where we want them." Through his earpiece, Marcus heard the sound of multiple SWAT teams breaching the building's perimeter. The breach team leader heard it too, his posture tensing as he realized their window of opportunity was closing. "You still don't understand what's really happening here," the leader said, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and frustration. "This isn't about art or authentication records. That's just the surface." "Then enlighten me," Marcus replied, subtly shifting his stance to prepare for what he knew was coming. "The art market is just a cover," Hayes interjected, her words rushing out as she realized their plan was unraveling. "The real target is the financial system that supports it. Insurance companies, investment firms, private collectors. When the market crashes, it triggers a cascade effect." "Economic warfare," Marcus concluded. "Destabilize the art market, and you can potentially crash entire financial sectors. But that still doesn't explain the multiple teams, the Black Ops involvement." The breach team leader laughed harshly. "Because different agencies want different outcomes. Some want to prevent the crash, others want to profit from it, and some want to use it as cover for something else entirely," Marcus finished. He turned to Hayes. "That's why you needed real military contractors. This isn't just about stealing or destroying art. You're testing security responses, aren't you? learning how different agencies react to a coordinated attack on cultural institutions. Before anyone could respond, Sullivan's urgent voice cut through. "Marcus, we've got a serious problem. The Vault team, they're not heading for the servers. They're moving towards something else, something that's not on any of our blueprints." The breach team leader's posture changed subtly, a tell that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. This wasn't just about art or money or even security protocols. They were after something hidden in the museum's foundations, something important enough to justify a black ops operation. "What's in the vault?" Marcus demanded. "What are you really here for?" Hayes smiled, but it was the breach team leader who answered. "Sorry, but that's classified. Level 10 clearance. Need-to-know basis." "And now," Hayes added, reaching into her jacket, "you know too much." The next few seconds would determine not just the fate of the museum's collection, but potentially something far more significant. Marcus had prepared for art thieves, for professional criminals, even for corrupt officials. But he was about to learn that some secrets are worth killing for. Hayes's hand emerged from her jacket, holding not a weapon, but a small metallic device with a blinking red light. The breach team leader instantly recognized it, taking an involuntary step backward. "That's a level 7 containment trigger," he said, his trained composure cracking. "Those aren't supposed to exist outside of classified research facilities," Hayes finished, her smile turning predatory. "Amazing what you can acquire with the right clearance levels. Or should I say, the right forgeries." Marcus's mind raced through his military training, trying to recall any mention of level 7 containment protocols. Through his earpiece, Sullivan's sharp intake of breath told him the commander recognized the device. "Marcus," Sullivan's voice was tight with concern, "if that's what I think it is, we've got bigger problems than art theft. Those devices were designed for rapid molecular deterioration of sensitive materials. In the wrong hands?" "In the right hands," Hayes interrupted, somehow hearing the transmission through her own advanced communications gear. "It's the perfect tool for erasing evidence, or in this case, erasing history itself." The breach team leader raised his hand, signaling his men to fall back. "This wasn't part of the mission parameters. We're here to secure artifacts, not—" "Your mission parameters just changed," Hayes snapped. "Or did you think your agencies were the only ones with skin in this game?" Through the loading dock's reinforced windows, Marcus could see more tactical teams taking up positions outside. SWAT, FBI, and what looked like specialized military units, all converging on the museum. But they were too late. "The Vault team is approaching the target," Sullivan reported urgently. "Whatever's down there, they're almost at it. But there's something else. We're picking up strange energy readings from beneath the museum. Something's already active down there." Marcus kept his voice steady, buying time as he assessed options. "What's really in those foundations, Hayes? What's worth bringing in multiple Black Ops teams and experimental containment devices?" Hayes glanced at her expensive watch, then back at Marcus with an almost pitying expression. "You've spent 3 years protecting this museum's art collection. Did you never wonder why this building was constructed here? Why certain areas were sealed off and marked as maintenance tunnels? The Cold War blueprints," Marcus realized. "This wasn't just a museum. It was built as cover for something else." Finally, he begins to understand. Hayes held up the containment trigger. During the Cold War, certain artifacts were discovered, items that defied conventional explanation. They needed somewhere to store them, somewhere public enough to avoid suspicion, but secure enough to contain what they'd found. The breach team leader's posture had changed, his training warring with new information. "We weren't briefed on any of this. Our orders were simple containment and retrieval. Because your agencies don't have high enough clearance to know what they're really protecting," Hayes said. "But someone else does, someone who's waited decades to reclaim what was hidden here." Marcus's earpiece crackled with Sullivan's voice. "The Vault teams breached the final barrier. Whatever's down there, the energy readings are off the charts." Hayes pressed a button on the containment trigger, causing its red light to pulse faster. "In exactly 60 seconds, this device will initiate a cascade reaction. Everything within a 100-meter radius will be reduced to its base molecular structure. Art, evidence, bodies, All of it will simply cease to exist. Along with whatever's in that vault, Marcus added, finally understanding. This isn't about destroying art or crashing markets. You're trying to make sure nobody gets what's down there. Not the agencies, not the military, not even your own people. Very good. Hayes nodded appreciatively. But still not quite seeing the whole picture. The vault isn't just a storage facility. It's been containing something that's been waiting, gathering energy, growing stronger. And in about 30 seconds, both the containment systems and everything else in range will be reduced to atoms. The breach team leader made a decision, signaling his men to evacuate. Fall back! Clear the blast radius! But Marcus stood his ground, a slight smile playing across his face. 3 years, he said quietly. Hayes's triumphant expression faltered. What? 3 years I've been here, Marcus continued. Did you really think I spent all that time just cataloging art and installing backup systems? He reached into his pocket and withdrew what looked like an ancient coin. I found the vault 6 months after I started, found out what was inside it, and I've been preparing ever since. Hayes's eyes widened as she recognized the symbols etched into the coin's surface, symbols that matched unknown markings in the vault's deepest chambers. That's impossible, she whispered. Those artifacts were classified beyond top secret. How did you… Because, Marcus said calmly, I was sent here to protect them, by the people who hid them in the first place. The containment trigger's light pulsed faster, counting down the final seconds. But Marcus wasn't worried anymore. Sometimes the best way to protect something isn't to hide it, it's to make sure the right guardian is watching over it. And now it was time to show everyone exactly what that meant. The ancient coin in Marcus's hand began to emit a soft blue glow, its etched symbols pulsing in rhythm with whatever energy was building beneath the museum. Hayes's containment trigger continued its countdown, but her confidence had been replaced by uncertainty. Those artifacts were supposed to be dormant, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The energy readings were minimal for decades, unless ... her eyes widened in realization. Unless someone's been waking them up, preparing them. Marcus held the coin steady, its light growing stronger. Like I said, 3 years is a long time to prepare. Commander, status report? Sullivan's voice came through clearly. Vault team has reached the central chamber. They're reporting. Marcus, they say the containment field is already down. Whatever's down there, it's already active. The breach team leader had stopped his retreat, his training warring with his curiosity. What exactly are we dealing with here? Would you believe me if I said alien artifacts? Marcus asked, allowing himself a small smile at their expressions. No, not aliens, something much older. Something that was here long before us, leaving behind pieces of technology we're only beginning to understand. Hayes's finger tightened on the containment trigger. Then you know why it has to be destroyed. That kind of power, that kind of technology, no one should have access to it. Agreed, Marcus said calmly, which is why it's been protected all this time. Not by governments or agencies, but by people chosen specifically for this task. People who understand that some things aren't meant to be used, they're meant to be preserved. The coin's glow had become intense now, casting sharp shadows across the loading dock. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Sullivan gasp. The energy readings just went off the scale. Whatever you're doing, son, it's affecting the entire building. Hayes made her decision, pressing the containment trigger's activation switch. Then we all go down together. Better that than letting this power fall into the wrong hands. But nothing happened. Hayes pressed the switch again, then again, her composure cracking completely. What did you do? Marcus held up the glowing coin. This isn't just a key or a symbol. It's part of their control systems. And for the past 3 years, I've been using it to establish a new containment field. One that doesn't just suppress the energy, but harmonizes with it. The floor beneath them began to vibrate as waves of energy pulsed up from the vault. The breach team's remaining electronic equipment sparked and died, and Hayes's containment trigger crumbled into dust in her hands. Impossible, she breathed. The power requirements for something like that would be… Would be exactly what's been building up in that vault for decades, Marcus finished. All it needed was someone who understood how to channel it properly. Through the loading dock windows, the gathering law enforcement teams watched in awe as ribbons of blue energy began coursing up the museum's walls. The building itself seemed to be coming alive, responding to whatever power was awakening within it. Marcus, Sullivan's voice carried a note of warning. Multiple agencies are ordering an immediate evacuation. They're talking about nuclear containment protocols. Tell them to stand down, Marcus replied calmly. The situation is under control. In fact, he raised the coin higher, its light now almost blinding. It always was. Hayes made one last desperate move, pulling a concealed weapon from her jacket. But before she could aim, the energy flowing through the building intensified. Every piece of modern technology in the loading dock, weapons, communications gear, tactical equipment, simply stopped working. You don't understand what you've done, Hayes said, dropping her now useless weapon. The people I work for, they won't stop coming. That power is too valuable to— To what? Marcus interrupted. To leave in the hands of its guardians? The people who've been protecting it since before your organizations existed. He took a step forward, the coin's energy creating a visible field around him. Look around you. Really look. This building, this museum, it was never just about protecting art. It was about protecting something far older, far more important. The breach team leader found his voice. What are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes the best place to hide something precious is in plain sight, surrounded by other precious things, guarded by people everyone underestimates. Marcus gestured to his uniform. Did you really think I was just a security guard? The energy waves reached a crescendo, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to ripple. Through the distortion, Hayes and the others caught glimpses of what lay beneath the museum's mundane exterior. Ancient mechanisms, impossible geometries, technology that defied modern understanding. The artifacts in the vault, Marcus continued, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate with the energy around them. They're not weapons or power sources to be fought over. They're keys, pieces of a legacy left behind by a civilization that understood power isn't about destruction, it's about preservation. Sullivan's voice came through one last time. Marcus, whatever you're doing, it's working. The energy readings are stabilizing. The vault, it's sealing itself. Hayes watched in defeat as her carefully planned operation crumbled around her. The museum's hidden nature revealed, its true purpose exposed, and its guardian finally showing his real role. The coin's light began to fade, the energy waves receding back into the building's foundation. But something had fundamentally changed. The museum's disguise had slipped, just for a moment, showing everyone present that some secrets are meant to stay hidden, protected not by force but by those chosen to stand guard over them. Marcus Chen, the simple security guard who was anything but simple, had just rewritten the rules of the game. And nothing would ever be the same. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the museum's loading dock had become a hub of controlled chaos. Multiple agencies had established a perimeter, their vehicles' lights casting alternating patterns across the building's ancient facade. Hayes and her remaining operatives were in custody, being processed by agents wearing insignias from organizations that officially didn't exist. Marcus stood by the main entrance watching as Commander Sullivan coordinated with various agency heads. The old warrior moved with renewed purpose, his cane now clearly just for show. Through the windows, the morning sun cast long shadows across exhibits that would never be seen quite the same way again. Quite a mess you've caused, Sullivan said, approaching Marcus after finishing his briefings. Half a dozen agencies fighting over jurisdiction, classified artifacts exposed, and a museum that's apparently more than just a museum. Marcus adjusted his seemingly ordinary security uniform. How are they handling it? About as well as you'd expect. Some want to shut the whole place down, study every inch of it. Others are pushing to maintain the cover, keep the public ignorant. Sullivan's eyes twinkled. And then there are those who still think they can somehow gain control of what's down there. And Hayes? Not talking, but her background checks are revealing interesting connections. Private military contractors, shadow organizations, even some government ties. This goes deeper than anyone suspected. Sullivan paused, studying Marcus carefully. Though I suspect you already knew that. Marcus watched as conservation teams began the delicate process of returning the authentic artifacts to their displays. 3 years gives you time to learn a lot of things, including who might eventually come looking for what's hidden here. And the real artifacts? The ones in the vault? Safe, Marcus replied simply. Some things aren't meant to be used or studied. They're meant to be preserved, protected. That's why this place was built, not just to hide them, but to guard them until they're needed. Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. And the Guardians? The ones who chose you? Still out there, still watching, still choosing people to stand guard in places most would never think to look. Marcus smiled slightly. After all, who pays attention to a museum security guard? Through the gallery windows they could see the first morning visitors arriving, unaware of the night's events. To them, it was just another day at the museum. The art would still be beautiful, the history still fascinating, the guards still stoically watching from their posts. What happens now? Sullivan asked. After what was revealed here, things can't just go back to normal. Marcus straightened his uniform and took his position by the main entrance. That's exactly what has to happen. The best way to protect something extraordinary is to make it seem ordinary. Life goes on, visitors come and go, and the Guardians keep watching. And Hayes's organization? They'll try again. Of course they will, but they'll be more cautious now, knowing what they're really dealing with. Marcus's eyes scanned the gathering crowd of visitors. And we'll be ready. Some secrets are worth protecting, worth standing guard over no matter who comes looking for them. Sullivan's cane tapped thoughtfully against the floor. You know, when I first saw you standing here, I thought you were just another security guard who needed backup. Turns out I was the backup all along. We all have our roles to play, Commander. Some are just less obvious than others. The museum's doors opened, admitting the first visitors of the day. Among them, Marcus noted several faces that didn't quite fit. Agents from various organizations, no doubt assigned to monitor the situation. Let them watch. The real protection didn't come from agencies or organizations. It came from those chosen to stand guard, hiding in plain sight. Will you stay? Sullivan asked quietly. Now that they know about this place? Marcus nodded toward the growing crowd of visitors. Where else would I go? This is what I was chosen for. To stand guard, to watch, to protect. Not just the art or the artifacts, but something older, something more important. The truth? The possibility, Marcus corrected. The knowledge that there's more to our world than most people imagine. And sometimes the best way to protect that knowledge is to hide it in the most obvious place possible. Sullivan smiled, understanding at last. Behind bulletproof glass, surrounded by priceless art, watched over by guards that nobody really notices. Exactly. The commander straightened, his posture reflecting his military bearing. Well then, I suppose I should leave you to your post. After all, a security guard's work is never done. Marcus took his position, assuming the stoic stance that had become second nature over the years. Around him, visitors began filling the galleries, their excited chatter echoing off marble walls that held more secrets than they could imagine. To them, he was just another guard, standing motionless at his post. And that was exactly as it should be. Because sometimes the best guardians are the ones hiding in plain sight, watching, waiting, protecting things that most people don't even know exist. The museum had survived, its deeper secrets still safely hidden beneath layers of ordinary existence, and Marcus Chen, the guard who was so much more than a guard, would continue his vigil. Standing watch not just over priceless art, but over truths that the world wasn't quite ready to know. After all, that's what guardians do. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.